Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I am joined today by Mr. Paul Levy from Brownells. We're hanging out here at the preview day for one of Rock Island's awesome sales, and we figured this would be a good opportunity to talk about some of the neat stuff that Brownells has been doing with reproduction rifles, or your retro series.
Yeah, we have an AR-10 here today, and our retro line was pretty famous for the BRN-10 reproduction AR-10 model.
I will be honest, the BRN-10 is my favorite of the retro rifles you've done. So you've done a bunch of the AR-15 ones, but the 308, the original AR-10, to me that was the really cool.
Yeah, so this is not Brownells BRN-10, this is an original.
Yeah.
So the BRN-10 proved pretty popular to those customers that were quite excited about that authentic AR-10 look. We're not going to be producing that BRN-10 model anymore. Just the sales quite aren't there to do another batch of a unique rifle for a very small customer base.
Okay.
So we only got a few left, probably by the time this video airs.
All right, so I want to ask you, a lot of people ask about, we want to make a reproduction of this or that or the other, and a lot of people try, and there's a pretty low success rate of companies that attempt to make reproduction rifles. So why, if I remember correctly, the BRN-10 was the first one that you did, wasn't it?
We did the ARs first. We did the AR-15 models first. There was the BRN-16A1, which was quite popular for people wanting a Vietnam era, and then an XM177 clone as well. So those were our initial models, and the following SHOT Show we came out with the BRN-10.
Okay. Now, I imagine the AR-15 patterns were a little easier to create because of the huge base of AR-15 manufacturing already. There are AR-10s being made, but not as many. How much did you have to actually build from scratch versus how much were you able to just get on the market?
So with the BRN-10, we tried to borrow as much from the existing 308 DPMS pattern as possible. So we went to those vendors that were already making those type of components, the bolt carrier groups, the barrels, to source those. Because if we had to go from the ground up, we didn't have prints or anything to reference. So if we had to go from the ground up, reverse engineer an AR-10, it would have cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. It wouldn't really have been that viable. So that was the big hurdle. And then a few components did have to be done from the ground up, like the lower receiver, the upper receiver, and of course the charging handle, the front sight. Actually, the front sight, we got a lot of feedback at the announcement at SHOT Show because we had an A2 front sight posted as well. That was something we could procure, and we saw immediately that people were not going to have that on a reproduction gun. It had to look and feel like the original. So that's something we stepped back, like, okay, let's get this right at launch, produce the more authentic AR-10 front sight, and brought that to market.
Okay. Knowing now, having gone through the whole process, what would you do differently if you were trying to bring another reproduction to market like this?
Yeah, for the BRN-10, probably would have gone through probably would have stepped back and gotten more details, got more examples to reference, and probably with the charging handle, I would have done the later Portuguese style collapsing charging handle, which would have been a more slick system, but it is more complicated. And that would have been one thing, but really just step back, get more original examples, and make it a bit closer to the original, if possible, would have been my preference.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me that the closer you get to the exact original copy, the more work you have to do on all the little details, and the more expensive it gets.
Yeah.
And there's a balancing act here between making something that is cost-effective enough that you can sell enough of them to make it work, versus making it a perfect reproduction that those three guys that are willing to pay $5,000 for a repro.
Yeah, there's things like that. There's the handguards on ours that were a two-piece that look very close to this, but they mount entirely different. They attach like a later A1 or A2 handguard with a delta ring. But doing this from the ground up, and doing a sleeved portion like this for the bayonet and flash hider, there's a lot of nuanced stuff like that. That's where, at a certain point on the BRN-10, we got to, okay, this is going to appease 90% of those guys looking for a reproduction or something that looks and feels like the original. But the guy looking for something that has a certain recess there or a certain serration there, once you try to get to that, that's where I think your costs really start to get out of hand. Probably would have been too practical.
Did you have any particular litmus test or guideline for whether to make a particular modification or detail? Or was it just kind of...
It was really, I'd say that front sight was probably a big one. That was like, okay, we can't have it look like an A1, a later thing. Didn't even have anything to do with it. But really, it was that general look and feel. If you're looking at it from a distance, like that's an AR-10. That was kind of the litmus test. Or the sighting system functioning like the original. That was okay. We got to get those things. But it was really kind of more of a gut, I'd say, on that side of things. So okay, that's going to be okay, or no, that we got to fix that before we go to market.
Any advice you would give to people who are planning to make a reproduction of something else? Like, if someone let's say if someone brings a project to you, like, I want to make reproduction Sturmgewehrs.
Yeah.
How would you judge the effectiveness or the economic sense in a reproduction rifle?
Yeah, there's got to be a market for it. You got to gauge that demand. Like, you and your buddies might all be excited about it, but if there's not several thousand people out there that are willing to purchase it, that's going to be a tough one, and you're going to have a lot of tooling inventory sitting around that's not really there. So doing your upfront market research is definitely going to be essential. And we did a good bit of that. We'd seen the one thing to rely on with the BRN-10 is there was previous attempts. There was Armalite, or the modern day Armalite, had done one in the early 2000s. We saw what people didn't like about that, or other reproduction attempts, say with the AR-15. We saw what people didn't like there. So we could lean on what those customers were saying for feedback and not do those things.
Did you see any particular issues of, we asked people and everyone on the internet said, oh yeah, we're totally into that, but when we actually had them ready, everyone kind of disappeared? Or did you have a good, reliable, like, yeah, we think we'll sell 5,000 and we actually sold 5,000?
Yeah, with the BRN-10 and the retros in general, it was pretty good. I'd say with the magazines, like doing the waffle pattern magazine, doing a relatively limited run, and hence they're more expensive. A lot of people didn't seem to buy those. Or say like for the BRN Proto, the prototype rifle, the 25 round magazine, people say that's cool, that's awesome, and then they don't sell. they're more expensive. That's understandable. Magazines are perceived to be a disposable item, and when somebody sees a $50 magazine, they're like, well, that's a bit much for me. So that would be one item that probably stands out. We did do some carbine barrels and handguards for the BRN-10. We have them listed on the site, and it doesn't seem to get a whole lot of interest there.
Okay.
So for people to build their own BRN-10, you can do that right now. You can buy the receivers, you can buy the carbine barrel and assemble that. You can do a weird little XM177 BRN-10 if you wanted to.
Sounds kind of cool.
So that is one area that kind of did drop off in interest. Like, people were like, that'd be cool to do a carbine, and then we didn't actually bring the gun itself to market. When people had to actually get a wrench out, it didn't happen.
Okay. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Now, you said at the very beginning here that you're not going to be doing another run of these.
Yeah, so the BRN-10, we had a good reception to it, but if we were to go produce more based on the current demand and where we see it going, and those customers that bought it, we feel we've met that demand. That type of customer that's going to purchase a BRN-10 has bought one already, and there's not more of those unique customers out there that are probably going to purchase.
Okay, so this was like, we're going to make, what, 1,000, 5,000?
There's a few thousand out there. Yep.
Okay.
So,
and did you build them all in a batch at first?
It was mostly done in one batch. There was really, I'd say, two, and like I believe there's a later third batch.
Okay.
Yeah, but those were, I should step back and say that we worked jointly with FM Products and then PWS to make the BRN-10. So FM Products did a lot of the work on the receiver design to get that up to snuff. The charging handle was probably the most difficult thing, and even the end result is still stiff when you got to actuate it. But we originally wanted the original detent charging handle system, but we found that was not reliable to stay in place. With that small spring, and if you have a smaller detent, it doesn't get as much bite on the receiver. If you get a larger detent, it results in a smaller spring, and it applies less pressure. It doesn't stay in place. So you get, for like a month there, I probably had marks on my face all the time.
I have shot a number of originals, and a lot of them, the charging handle bounces open when you're shooting.
Yeah, and we just didn't think with a modern rifle that would be satisfactory for a U.S. customer.
Man, that brings up like one of these impossible questions with a repro is, with a gun like this, we know exactly what the problems are because they fixed them. Like, the point of doing a reproduction is you're bringing back the original design, both the good and the bad, and you have to make these decisions of which bad features do we deliberately retain because that's what people expect.
Yeah, and this is pretty. You can't do an AR-10 and not have this.
Right, you have to have the trigger charging handle.
Yeah.
But you don't want it to be popping open on people.
So we have a spring system in there, and I will say this: I'll have a call out for Mike at Nodak Spud. He helped us a ton on the BRN-10 and the retro line. And frankly, I was talking with him on the BRN-10 to come up with, okay, use existing DPMS parts, you can get this far, and then you can bring it to market. So he was great for input, a great guy. Check out his products too.
Yeah, he's a very cool guy. I've talked to him at some shows.
Yeah. Mike is awesome. But yeah, that was, so PWS did the production then. So FM did the design on the receivers, PWS did the assembly, the test firing. Every BRN-10 gets test fired, I believe 10 rounds they put through it in the factory there, and then ship it out to Iowa at our warehouse.
Okay. So a couple thousand total is not a bad run for a reproduction rifle.
No, we're pretty happy with it. It's definitely a unique system out there. It will still have the parts pieces, a lot of those things for a good while too. So if you want to still build one, you can do that.
Okay, so there will be parts support for it.
Yep.
Okay. So as of, I don't know exactly when this video is going to be airing, but as of right now, how many of them are still around?
There's probably a few hundred in inventory right now, but given the current market, if you haven't been paying attention, I don't know how those will stick around.
Yeah, away they go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'm curious to talk about your other plans for retro rifles, but we should probably put that in a separate video and talk about some of the 5.56 stuff. So
Sounds good.
Thank you for taking the time. I think this is a fascinating area to me. There's so many people who try to do reproductions, and you don't even see in the public view, you don't even see a lot of them, because a lot of these things fail before they even get to the point of having anything to announce or advertise. And even the ones that do get to the point of an announcement, so many of them never make it to market, or by the time they do get to market, they have these fundamental problems of, well, we're able to make 3 guns every 6 weeks, and by the way, you don't get magazines because we haven't finished the magazines yet.
I will say that we did that to ourselves with the BRN-10, and thankfully we were far enough along that we were close to production, and we did get to production in time. But that's one thing I would have done differently. That okay, let's announce with inventory. And we made that classic mistake. Thankfully, it went relatively smooth.
Okay, well, that's good. So yeah, you guys have pulled off one of a small, proud group of companies that have managed to make a reproduction rifle that is excellent and actually works and does everything as advertised. So, thank you. Awesome. I have a bunch of other videos on the BRN-10s. My favorite, by the way, is, see, I like the brown furniture they did, but I like the fluted barrel that's on the black furniture gun.
So I will say you can buy the individual barrel and build out one to your preference.
There you go. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks very much to Paul Levy from Brownells for joining us today. Thanks for watching.